How do you think EAs will help in the transition back into the office, and whether that includes influencing protocols and decisions that businesses are making? And a big one would be helping others readjust and accept the fact that we have to go back into the office in some capacity now.
It is a big question. It is. I'm also Sydney, so and I've got clients that we're currently talking about, and I'm hearing organisations having town halls, the CEO having town halls, and people putting comments in. I don't want to come back to work if anyone's unvaccinated in the office. So it's highly emotive, and I think the classic role an EA can play is one of a calming influence, a calming voice. People make decisions on emotion first and logic second, if at all, on logic. And we just have to face that. We just have to face it. And I guess things like, in terms of influencing the protocols, the decisions of others, it comes down to helping to ensure that they are at least aware of the expert advice. They might not take it, but the people with the most knowledge about this is the health department. They've got the data. They know how things are happening. Yes, I guess there's a sort of layer of politics that goes over it to some extent, and also that's true to an extent. But there's also differing across state boundaries. There's differing qualities of health system and a capability to cope. So you're going to have differences of approach, which is going to be difficult for large organisations, right?
That's right.
So it is highly emotive. But I would just be suggesting, as best you can, be a voice of calm. Try and help people to put things in perspective. We're not in Afghanistan right now. 160,000 people die per annum in Australia. That's over 400 a day. Just naturally, and we've got to have some kind of perspective. I know it's difficult for people when it's about you and your risk or your perspectives, but I think it's just do your best to make sure that people are aware of that information and be that calming voice as much as you can.
Okay, and so just kind of moving on from that, but still a few things that you mentioned there is, how do we as EAs balance our own beliefs or views? Because, a lot of people at the moment are actually enjoying the work from home. They've seen benefits to it. So we all have our own opinions on what we want to do, whether we want to go back a few days or full-time, not at all. The whole unvaxxed, I don't want to go back if not everyone's not vaxxed.
Mm-hmm.
How do we balance what we believe and what we want and that of the business, when the business is just saying this is what we're going to do, fall in line pretty much?
Mm-hmm.
How do we balance that when we're kind of trying to tell others, accept it, come back in, here's the health advice? How do we kind of balance that for ourselves?
Well, that's even a tougher one. But, I mean, I think well, again, you've got to calm yourself, and for a second, what I would say to you is wind back before COVID. Did your values align to your organisation's values? Were you happy to be there? Now, is there a misalignment now with the values of the organisation? And then ask yourself this question: is this misalignment sort of forced because of COVID and temporary, or is it something bigger than that? And if it's bigger than that, then that's you're facing different questions to balancing your beliefs. But the question I would ask is, if you were fine with the values before, and you do decide that this is a forced imbalance for the time being, then you make a decision on if you're happy to cope with that for the time being, and what do they say? Toe the company line, or not. But I think try and put in perspective. I mean, has this been a horrible company and you shouldn't have been here in the first place? or you've loved this company and you've loved working there. We all have our disagreements, and we've got to move on.
Okay, great. And so then taking it more from the personal side to the business perspective, businesses have obviously done it really tough in the last 2 years, having to lay staff off, really, really struggling, especially on the profit line. I'm from a retail business, so, we had across Australia shops shut, no one coming in. We were able to pivot in some manner to kind of keep things going and keep as much staff on as possible. But how do businesses or leaders within that business balance the risks of returning to the office versus, continuing to make money? Not so much keeping people employed, because that's an obvious thing, but how do businesses balance risks here in these situations?
Well, again, it's my advice is always put in perspective that there's going to be health advice, and the first thing I think every leader should do is say, right, well, if that's the health advice and that's the public health order, that's what we're going to follow. So if they say, masks in the work environment, then masks in the work environment. And then you ask yourself, well, how conducive is that to good teamwork if our teams, and that's if our teams have become very effective online, and some have more so than others. So from my knowledge of both friends and clients, and so where that's perfectly fine, and people can come back and co-locate and wear masks, and people are comfortable to do so, then great. What's the probably bigger issue then is as we reach the point where unvaccinated people can do as much as vaccinated people, and dealing with those issues. So we've already seen people like Qantas and Telstra mandate vaccines. Again, that's choices of particular executive teams and boards, and I don't expect them all going to be the same. Be hard enough it is to say when you disagree with certain decisions when it comes to this pandemic. It would be a terrible thing if we all thought the same and acted the same. It'd be a pretty boring world. Having said that, when people's views are very, very different to yours, it can be testing. So that's the first thing, that follow the advice of the health authorities. But one thing I've done all through this pandemic, if I've taken responsibility for understanding the risk level in a quantified way from my own perspective. In fact, I've helped clients in government emergency services do things like estimating demand on their services based on COVID case numbers. The data just wasn't available from government back in March last year. And so I did my best to estimate for them. I took the challenge on, and a bit of luck, got quite close. But there is data out there that you can say, well, that's the advice from the health authorities, and it's sort of based on this. What about our environment? Our environment is or is not public facing. Our environment is or is not full of great airflow. Our environment is full or it is not of very vulnerable people. These are the things that you've got to take into account and do your risk assessment, personalize it for the workplace. And then the other one is to take the advice from the legal fraternity, which again is challenging on safe workplaces and things. And I guess again, different organisations will come to different decisions, which goes back to your comment about, or the question about EAs and balancing their beliefs and values. Is this temporary and is it okay or not? And again, the balance sometimes is, well, I won't have enough staff to operate if I don't allow the unvaccinated. So what do I do? Shut down? What do I do?
Yeah.
Get people to work ridiculous hours? What's the answer? And they're difficult decisions, and it will vary. And I guess again, be the calming influence as best you can.
Because I'm in the telco industry, so we have the operational side, people that sit in the office, And then, we've got our people out on the road, we've got our people in stores. So, there's a lot of businesses are multifaceted. So there's never really going to be a one-stop shop kind of thing. And I think that that's what is coming very clear in a lot of things. We've done surveys on returning to work, and, a lot of what's coming around is, people saying, well, I don't want to sit in an office because it's recirculated air. But then it's like, well, hang on, our store staff have got to be out in front of people, and people coming into the store, we don't know if they're vaxxed. And if businesses kind of start to just say, well, vax people only, you've got frontline staff that are popping a lot of abuse. So it's not, when I think about it, you kind of think of risk, and, some people kind of like, oh, I don't want to think about risk, because to me, even myself, when I think of risk, I just shut down, because I'm just like, oh, it's my brain capacity won't go that way. But, when you think about it, you kind of think about the risk directly affected to yourself. But it's not just a risk of getting COVID, it's a risk of safety to staff, safety to customers, fire bombings. People could go completely crazy and start vandalizing, businesses. So, I feel sorry for businesses in this kind of situation, because it's where the staff are thinking about kind of very kind of selfishly, in a way, themselves and their own risk. Businesses need to look at a wide range. And I think if EAs can kind of understand that even just a little bit, that it's not just safety of coming in and having to wear a mask and sanitize and do, temperature checks. There's a whole range of things that businesses need to look at when deciding to come back to work, or, their COVID safe practices.
That's right. And the world overseas is moving on, you look at the sporting events overseas, there's tens of thousands of people not a mask in sight, just getting on with life. I think that's one of the, we've had a sort of a blessed life down this part of the world, and, obviously some states even more so than others. But the other end of that stick is needing to face those opening up days, and it's going to be uncomfortable for a lot of people. On the other hand, for a lot of other people, it's just going to be a blessing. Can't wait. So it's there's the collective good, and then there's the individual safety issues, and it comes back again. You've got to do that balancing of your values and your beliefs against the current circumstances and make decisions. And people in healthcare, people in aged care, been forced to vaccinate, and they've got to very, very high numbers of vaccination. So, those people, I guess, made that final call to put those things aside and said, well, I do like working in aged care. I do like being a healthcare worker, and I want to continue. So, when it comes to being agile and this coming back to work, though, one of the things I think is really important is clarity and communication for that clarity. So once an organisation makes its decision on, allowing flexible working or not, or what degree, they really should make sure the rules are pretty clear, not pretty clear, really clear. Minimise the grey areas. I mean, one of the most frustrating things in this pandemic has been trying to work out what's black and what's white when it's so much grey and so many conflicting things. Harder at a government level, but please, for an organisation, particularly smaller ones, and as you get bigger, please, as best you can, at least by type of business unit, be crystal clear and communicate it very clearly, get the questions back and get it clear. If people have absolute clarity about what the rules are, there's no, much less chance of people bending them, and people can make a much more informed decision about do they want to be part of this or not, and you'll get a understanding of the quality of your decision faster, by the engagement of your workforce.
And just kind of going on from the engagement piece that you've just mentioned, because that is obviously a big part of being as part of a business. Is, you know, you can go, you can like your job, you can, you know, you get paid for it. So that's, you know, realistically why we all work, to get paid. But being engaged, and, you know, I've seen on LinkedIn a lot recently, a lot of articles around what they're about to call the Great Resignation, and it's set for March next year, where they believe, you know, and you know, the market is saying it is a candidates market at the moment. So, you know, a lot of people are kind of gearing up to see in March, when things are kind of a little bit more back to normal and or the new normal, sorry. A lot of people leaving where they've been possibly for many years for greener pastures, if you know, or businesses that are more aligned to them. How can a business that, you know, for so many years has had someone highly engaged, very good at their job, has loved working there, but now they're going, well, hang on, maybe there's something greener over there. How are businesses, the best way for businesses to kind of mitigate that? And, you know, besides the obvious of just, you know, oh, look, we'll offer a bit more flexibility, and, you know, what can businesses truly do to keep high valued staff members once this pandemic is more under control?
I think it's innovate your business model as best you can. Instead of saying, how can I accommodate this person so I can get what I normally get from them in a different way, I'd be saying, wait a second, what if we just threw the whole way we do business up in the air for a second and let it all land, and then rearrange it and see if we can turn this into actually a growth strategy, or you know, if you're not for profit, having more impact, or if you're in government, you know, or it's either better or stronger policy, or more rapid policy, or if it's not a policy agency, you know, more impact in services, faster, better. You know, how could this be now different with you know, more people operating in a different way, and just say to yourself, right, let's just say this is the way it's going to be. How can we possibly make this even better? And then it's the power of people's ability to think outside the box and come up with new ideas and creative, and it's there. You just got to try it. And I'm not saying every business will find something world beating, but I think everyone will be pleasantly surprised about the opportunities that we can create by having people have that flexibility from not being in capital cities. Who knows what kind of co-working hubs will arise in regional parts of the country, where, you know, people from your organisation will be working side by side by not necessarily a competitor, but a corporate customer of yours, and just getting a corporate customer's perspective, because you're co-located, and getting some ideas can change the way that your business operates for them. You know, there's opportunity out there. I think we just got to be open-minded.
No, that's great, because, you know, I mean, there was a whole lot of thing about when this pandemic kind of first started. It was a lot of people, because they were forced into working remotely, kind of packed up and left the city, and they said, well, you know, I don't need to pay huge mortgages or huge rent now. I can live out in the country or regional areas. So, you know, I think that that's a really kind of good point that you make, that businesses should kind of look at where their staff are actually now situated. Whereas, you know, commuting to me seems to be one of the biggest pain points for a lot of people returning to the office. You know, they were like, I'm saving 1-2 hours a day in commuting. You know, and I know a lot of people kind of say, I'm working longer hours because I'm at home. And, you know, I've always maintained from the very beginning, I don't sit at my desk when I'm at home for my lunch. I don't do it in the office. So why would I do it at home? I physically get up and leave, you know, and I've always kind of said to people that have struggled, when I've spoken to them, they're like, I'm really struggling. I'm working. I'm on at 8 and I'm going until 6 or 7 at night. And I'm like, but that's your fault. You know, and they're like, what do you mean? I said, well, when you're in the office, you go and get a coffee You know, like we have a huge campus, so we've got coffee shops, you know, or just in the kitchen. And say, well, you don't sit at your desk 24/7 in the office. You get up, you go and chat to people, you know, you have your lunch break out in the lunchroom or down in one of the cafes. So why not do that at home?
Yeah.
You don't have to go to the cafe at home, but go and sit in your kitchen or your dining room, you know, go and sit outside. You know, for me, it's all about structure. And I think that's kind of, but I think it's great, you know, where you said looking at where your people are actually located now, because it may not make sense for them to come into the office, but if there is another office, you know, a customer, or, you know, if there's a hub of people, for instance, that kind of live in Newcastle, why not get a little space up in Newcastle and they can all go there, and there's that interaction with people. So I think like a lot of people, you know, you've got introverts and extroverts. Introverts kind of don't really mind not being in the office anymore, so they can deal with the Zoom calls and the Teams calls, whereas extroverts are craving that face-to-face, in-person. That kind of, there's a balance there maybe that the businesses kind of haven't thought about, which is, I think, is a good point.
As I said, there's a, you know, be boring world if we're all the same.
Exactly. You know, and a lot of businesses are pivoting. Big businesses, you know, Google, Facebook, especially in Silicon Valley, you know, they've pretty much said, don't come back. If you don't want to come back, don't come back. So, you know, I think that causes a lot of envy with some people. They're like, well, you know, they're doing it, why can't we? But, you know, so I suppose my final question really is, how do we all play a role in the new way of working? You know, because everyone has a role within a business, but collectively we've got one target and one goal to, you know, to get back on track. So how do we collectively, or as EAs, play a role in that?
I was going to say patience is a good virtue. You've got to give people time. You give the leaders time. You've got to give, you know, co-workers time, customers time. But I guess at some point in time, you've got to draw a line in the sand. But yeah, I just think keep our resilience up. Be patient. Let others adjust, and then draw the line in the sand at some point. Now, as an EA, what's that line in the sand? It might just be, you know, you've been empathetic to a certain circumstance, and you don't want to hear it anymore. So you just not having that conversation anymore.
Yeah.
You know, the world has moved on, and so should you. You know, it could be with the EA's manager. You know, we all know managers have interesting conversations with their EAs about certain circumstances and certain things that happen in a day, in a week, in a month. And again, it might just be patience with that manager, but perhaps drawing a line in the sand for them at some point and say, listen, this is what I'm reading, and I think many people need us to move on, and what moving on looks like might be this or this or this. That could prove quite helpful. I think it's you know, often we don't see things ourselves, and it just takes someone close to us like an EA to just say but and then eyes can open, and you know I know, you know, that sense of relief of oh now I see it. It can be very rewarding for the advisor, that an EA can be.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's kind of, EAs are kind of in a very strange position. You know, some EAs are brought to the table, boardroom table with their execs. Others kind of are left outside of the decisions or the you know, the goings on. But we hear everything. You know, we have people constantly call us, come to our desks, email us, text us, you know, FaceTime us, to vent, to, you know, to get everything off their chest. And we're in a very unique position, I feel, because we hear the feedback directly from staff, whereas staff will tend to not really go to their managers and vent, or give their feedback. It's one of my pet peeves, like when we get these anonymous surveys, people will vent for 6 months and whinge about everything, but when the survey comes out, they think, oh no, they can track me, so I'd better write that everything's great and rosy. My bosses are or my managers are very aware that they can usually pinpoint my comments because it's nothing I haven't said to them, to their face. So they can go through the verbatim and they go, there's Nats. She said that to me last week, so I know what. So, a lot of people kind of feel more comfortable venting to an EA than to the manager. So the EAs are kind of in a great position where they can give that, and they can kind of, to me, they can influence where the line in the sand is drawn.
Yeah, and just a word of not warning, but just be aware of our own biases. So confirmation bias is one of the most common, which is we think something, so we hear the things that confirm it and don't hear the things that work against it. So all these different people whining to you or commenting to you or whatever, and you'll hear the things that confirm your stance, and you haven't heard the others, and someone else sitting beside you, your alter ego, wouldn't have heard the same things. So please try and have a think about all the things people are saying to you, not just the ones that you want to hear. And I think advice you can give your manager is what I started with. People make decisions on emotion first, logic second, if at all. And just keep reminding them of that. And they've got to work on the emotion and tackle that. And that's why that word patience is important as we make that transition. And I firmly believe we'll all be in a better place very soon, and there'll be a sense of normality returning. It'll just be a different one, and there'll be people that have their nose out of joint and will go find somewhere else, and there'll be other people happier than ever.
Exactly, and it's just, again, that balancing act, so but I mean, I think that covers pretty much everything I wanted to pick your brain about today. So if there's anything else you kind of want to say, pieces, nuggets, do you want to kind of give out to anyone?
No, I just when I saw the questions or the topics that you wanted to cover, I thought, geez, I could have had an easier one, couldn't I? Because it is just such an emotional topic.